Welcome to this video. Before we begin, this audiobook is inspired by Mindset, Changing the Way You Think to Fulfill Your Potential by Carol Dweck, and this session brings together everything, every idea, every principle, every lesson, to guide you toward a stronger, freer mind. Take a slow breath. Let your shoulders drop. This moment is yours. You're here because something deep inside you is asking for change. Maybe you feel stuck. Maybe you're tired of repeating the same mistakes, tired of pretending to be okay, tired of carrying the weight of expectations, your own or someone else's. Maybe some part of you knows that you can be more, and yet another part is afraid you'll fall short again. I want you to know this before anything else. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are simply standing at the doorway of a different way of living, a way where you understand your mind, instead of being trapped by it, a way where effort is not a burden but a bridge, a way where your identity is not fixed, but expanding. You and I will walk this slowly. Not with pressure, not with judgment, but with clarity. There is a reason you sometimes feel like your own thoughts are working against you. A reason you worry about failure more than growth. A reason you pull back when things get challenging, even when you desperately want to push forward. And none of it means you are weak. What it really means is that you've been taught, in ways subtle and loud, that your abilities are fixed, that your worth is measured by how perfectly you perform, that mistakes reveal who you are instead of helping you become who you can be. In this session, I want to talk to the part of you that believes you must already be strong before you try, the part that feels ashamed when you struggle, the part that thinks a setback says something permanent about you. You've been carrying that for years, maybe for decades. But today, we start loosening that grip. You may not realize it yet, but your mind is constantly shaping the story you live in. It tells you what to attempt, what to avoid, what to believe about yourself. And for so long, you may have been moving through life with a silent pressure, to prove yourself, to be flawless, to never show weakness. You might have grown up believing that you were either smart or not, capable or not, talented or not. And every challenge felt like a test of who you already were. But I want you to hear me clearly. Your mind is adaptable. Your abilities are adaptable. Every part of you, your intelligence, your skills, your character, is something that can grow. Even the qualities you once believed were carved in stone can shift, evolve, and expand with effort, strategy, and support. For a moment, imagine a child confronted with a difficult puzzle. Some children light up, not because they enjoy failing, but because they know something powerful. Challenges make them better. Others freeze. They fear that struggling means they aren't capable. And the truth is, we all learn one of those responses early in life, long before we realized what it meant. Maybe you learned to chase only the tasks you could win easily. Maybe you learned to keep your hand down when you weren't completely sure. Maybe you started believing that your worth depended on performance. If so, you've carried a fixed identity for too long. But there is another identity available to you, one where struggle is not a verdict but a teacher, one where challenges are not threats but invitations, one where failure is not identity but information. And you're capable of stepping into that identity, even if you doubt that right now. So before we move any further, I want you to take a single breath and allow this idea to sink in. You are unfinished. You are not done growing. Who you are today is only the starting point of who you can become. Let yourself sit with that. Not as motivation, but as truth. Your entire life can look different once you stop treating every moment as a test of your worth and start treating it as an opportunity to expand what you're capable of. There comes a moment in every person's life when they realize that their reactions are not random. The way you respond to difficulty, the way you speak to yourself when something goes wrong, the way you shrink or rise in the face of challenge, it all comes from the beliefs you carry about your own abilities. And those beliefs often began forming long before you were old enough to question them. You may have grown up thinking success meant proving something. Proving you were smart, proving you were capable, proving you had potential, and somewhere along the way, success stopped being about learning and started being about protecting an identity. Every test, every judgment, every mistake became a measurement of who you were. Not what you knew, not what you could learn, but who you were. This is why challenges have felt so heavy. Because when you believe your abilities are fixed, every difficult moment feels like a threat. A threat to your image, a threat to your worth, a threat to the story you've been told you must maintain. Instead of growth, the goal becomes survival, surviving people's opinions, surviving comparison, surviving the fear of being exposed as less than you hoped. But when you understand how the mind actually works, when you begin to see the patterns clearly, something shifts. You realize your reactions have been shaped by beliefs, not truths. You begin to see why you avoided risks, why you hesitated to try new things, why one setback could send you spiraling. You weren't weak, you were protecting a version of yourself you thought had to be flawless. There is another way to live. A way where difficulty doesn't mean something is wrong with you. A way where effort is not evidence of inadequacy, but a path to mastery. A way where failure does not shrink your identity, but expands your skills. When you allow yourself to step into this mindset, you reclaim power you didn't realize you had. Suddenly, challenges do not define you, they develop you. Mistakes do not label you, they teach you. Effort does not expose you, it strengthens you. You begin to understand that the mind isn't meant to confirm your limitations, it's meant to stretch your potential. Think about how different your life becomes when you stop believing that everything you do is a test of your worth. Imagine approaching a hard task without worrying how you'll look. Imagine pursuing something new without needing to be perfect. Imagine allowing yourself to grow without demanding instant results. That feeling you're noticing right now, the sense of possibility, is the beginning of mental freedom. Not the loud, dramatic freedom people talk about, but the quiet kind, the kind that allows you to breathe again, the kind that lets you say, I can learn this, the kind that turns fear into curiosity and doubt into direction. You're starting to understand that your reactions, your choices, and your internal dialogue all come from the way you've learned to see yourself. And now, you're learning to see yourself differently, not as someone who must already be everything, but as someone capable of becoming more. This is not about perfection. It's about expansion. It's about reclaiming the space inside you that has been held hostage by fear. And as you keep moving forward, this understanding will become the foundation for a new way of thinking, a way that strengthens you from the inside out. There is a point in every person's journey where the meaning of success begins to shift. At first, success seems like something you earn by avoiding mistakes. You may have believed that the only way to feel worthy was to perform perfectly, immediately, and without effort, because effort, somewhere along the line, was painted as a sign that you were lacking. And so you learned to chase results instead of growth. But if you really think about it, the moments in your life that shaped you the most weren't the effortless ones. They were the ones that stretched you, the ones that required patience, the ones that demanded something deeper than talent. Success built on instant ease fades quickly, but the success that emerges from learning becomes the foundation of who you are. This is why the meaning of failure matters so much. When you believe your abilities are fixed, failure becomes an identity. It tells you who you are, not what you attempted. A low grade feels like a verdict. A rejection feels like a label. A mistake feels like proof that you're not enough. And living with that belief forces you into a life of avoidance, avoiding difficulty, avoiding risks, avoiding opportunities that might expose your imperfections. But when you understand that your abilities can grow, something powerful happens. Failure loses its weight. It stops being a mirror and becomes a message. Instead of saying, this is who you are, it says, here's where you can grow. Instead of shutting you down, it points you forward. Instead of making you shrink, it invites you to expand. You begin to see effort differently, too. Instead of thinking effort means you're not good enough, you start realizing effort is what makes you stronger. Every time you focus, every time you practice, every time you persist through challenge, you are literally changing your mind, rewiring it, strengthening it, expanding it. And suddenly, effort becomes something you value, not something you fear. If you've ever wondered why you felt anxious in the face of a challenge, look closely. It wasn't the challenge itself. It was the belief behind it. If I struggle, something is wrong with me. But once that belief breaks, anxiety fades. In its place comes curiosity, patience, determination. And this is where growth truly begins, not in the moments when everything goes well, but in the moments when things get difficult and you choose to stay present instead of shrinking away. You choose to learn instead of hide. You choose to adapt instead of protect your identity. You are capable of that shift. You are capable of meeting difficulty without assuming it defines you. You are capable of letting go of the pressure to perform perfectly and embracing the process that allows you to become more than you were yesterday. And the more you experience this, the more natural it becomes. You begin to trust yourself again, not because you expect perfection, but because you know you can grow through anything. This understanding doesn't remove challenges from your life, but it does change your relationship with them. You stop seeing them as threats and start seeing them as stepping stones. You stop fearing mistakes and start learning from them. You stop trying to protect an image and start building a life. This shift, from proving yourself to developing yourself, is the foundation of true inner strength. And once it settles inside you, you move through the world with a deeper calm, a clearer purpose, and a much stronger sense of who you can become. There is a moment in life when you watch someone who seems almost effortless, almost gifted, almost born for success, and you wonder why it never feels that easy for you. You see people called naturals, people who are praised for talent they barely have to explain, and a quiet doubt settles inside you. Maybe they were born different. Maybe you weren't meant to achieve the same heights. But that idea, as convincing as it feels, has held so many people back. Because the world loves the myth of the natural, the myth of talent, the myth that greatness arrives fully formed. Yet behind every champion, behind every master in any field, there is something far more real, and far more reachable. Growth. Relentless, steady, deliberate growth. Even the greatest performers, athletes, artists, leaders, were shaped not by ease, but by stretch. They stepped into difficulty again and again. They returned after failure. They learned to stay with discomfort long enough to grow through it. And slowly, that growth turned into excellence. Think about the people you admire, the ones who rise under pressure, the ones who seem to have unshakable strength. When you look closely, you'll see a pattern. They are not avoiding challenge, they are choosing it. They put themselves in situations where they are not the best, not the fastest, not the strongest. They seek coaches who push them. They look at their weaknesses without flinching. It's not talent they're protecting. It's potential they're expanding. And it's the opposite for those who cling to the idea of being naturally gifted. They avoid situations where they might struggle. They fear exposing gaps in their ability. They want to succeed instantly, or not try at all. Their energy goes toward looking flawless, not becoming better. When things get hard, they withdraw. When the outcome is uncertain, they hesitate. Instead of growing, they spend their lives guarding an image. There is such a difference between someone who wants to look capable and someone who wants to become capable. One stays at the surface. The other digs deeper, slowly, quietly, consistently. And the truth is, anyone can choose that path. You can choose that path, even if you've spent years believing otherwise. Take a breath. Let this sink in. Growth happens in the moments when you feel stretched. When you feel pressure, when you feel uncertain. Those moments, the ones you've maybe avoided, are the exact moments that build strength. They are not signs that something is wrong. They are indicators that something is developing. You don't need to be a natural. You don't need instant mastery. You don't need perfect beginnings. What you need is willingness, the willingness to work, to try, to struggle a little, to stay when it's uncomfortable. That willingness has built champions in every field. That willingness can reshape your life too. And as you move forward, remember this. Talent may open a door, but mindset decides whether you walk through it, whether you keep going, whether you rise after setbacks, whether you build yourself into someone stronger than you were before. Champion-style growth isn't loud. It isn't glamorous. It's quiet, steady, deliberate, and deeply human. In every workplace, in every team, in every company, there is an invisible force shaping behavior long before anyone notices it. That force is the mindset of the people at the top, the beliefs they carry about talent, ability, and leadership. You may have experienced environments where everything revolved around proving yourself, where mistakes were punished, where questions felt dangerous, where people were judged quickly and harshly. In places like that, the goal shifts from contributing to surviving, from learning to defending, from collaborating to competing. People stop taking risks. They stop sharing ideas. They stop growing. And slowly, the entire organization begins to lose life. Not because its people lack potential, but because the culture around them tells them it's safer not to try. There are leaders who operate from fear without even realizing it. They believe talent is everything, that the best people are the ones who succeed instantly, flawlessly, with no doubt or hesitation. And when they hold this belief, they begin building a world around it. They choose favorites, not based on growth or effort, but on image. They silence criticism because it feels like a threat. They discourage innovation because it carries the possibility of failure. They demand results without building the foundation that produces those results. And slowly, the team becomes more concerned with pleasing the leader than producing meaningful work. When the mindset at the top is fixed, everyone feels the pressure to appear perfect, even when the reality underneath is cracking. But there is another kind of leader, one whose presence changes the entire atmosphere of a workplace. A leader who believes people can grow, that abilities can be developed, that strength comes from learning and resilience. When leaders operate with this belief, they encourage questions. They invite challenges. They treat mistakes not as shameful events, but as pathways to improvement. They guide their teams with clarity rather than fear. They take responsibility for their own development and model the very growth they expect in others. Under this kind of leadership, people begin to relax. They begin to experiment again. They begin to push themselves, not because they fear judgment, but because they feel safe enough to try. It's powerful to witness what happens when a leader chooses long-term growth over short-term applause. Instead of creating pressure to look talented, they create conditions that help people become more capable. Instead of chasing instant results, they build systems that sustain success. They understand that progress requires experimentation, and experimentation requires room to fail, and recover, and learn. They look beyond the surface to see the potential beneath. They understand that criticism is information, not an attack. They value humility over ego, learning over status, and development over easy wins. They are not threatened by talented people, they invest in them. They do not guard power, they distribute it. And in doing so, they create environments where people don't just work, they grow. Sometimes the difference between the two styles of leadership is subtle. Sometimes it is enormous. But one of the clearest signs is how a leader reacts when things go wrong. Some leaders hide. They blame. They distance themselves from responsibility. They fear that admitting a mistake will expose them. Others step forward. They examine the failure openly, study it honestly, and use it to make better decisions. They understand that avoiding mistakes creates a fragile organization, while learning from them creates a resilient one. And this resilience, quiet, patient, steady, is what allows teams to innovate, to adapt, to navigate uncertainty, and to succeed in ways that fixed mindset environments can never sustain. If you look closer, you'll notice something else. In places where growth is encouraged, people feel seen. They feel valued not just for what they currently are, but for what they can become. Their contributions expand. Their confidence strengthens. Their creativity returns. They become more courageous, more open, more willing to try. A workplace becomes more than a place to earn a living. It becomes a place where people build themselves. Growth mindset leadership doesn't create better companies by accident. It creates better people, and those people create the company's excellence. And whether you lead a team, a group, a family, a project, or only your own life, the same truth applies. Everything changes when you believe growth is possible. Your decisions shift. Your relationships shift. Your reactions shift. You start choosing the kind of actions that build progress instead of protecting an image. And that shift, over time, becomes the reason you rise, slowly, steadily, and with a strength that wasn't accessible before. There are parts of life where mindset quietly shapes us more than we realize, and relationships are one of those places. Whether it's love, friendship, family, or connection, the beliefs you hold about yourself and others determine how deeply you let people in, how openly you handle conflict, and how secure or fragile you feel when things become difficult. Many people carry a secret fear in relationships, the fear that if someone truly sees their flaws, their insecurities, their imperfections, they will pull away. And so they hide. They protect their image. They avoid hard conversations. They seek someone who makes them feel perfect, not someone who helps them grow. But this creates a fragile kind of love, a fragile kind of connection, one that depends on staying flawless instead of staying honest. When relationships are built on the fear of being judged, every disagreement feels dangerous. Every misunderstanding feels like a threat. Criticism becomes unbearable because it feels like an attack on your identity. You may find yourself shutting down, pulling back, or defending too quickly, not because you don't care, but because somewhere inside, you believe that being wrong means you're unworthy. You might expect partners or friends to just understand you, without effort, without friction, without growth. And when things don't flow perfectly, you may assume something is broken. This is what happens when fixed beliefs about personality slip into relationships. You start thinking people can't change, that you can't change, that the dynamic is stuck the moment something goes wrong. But relationships built on growth feel different, calmer, more grounded. When you believe people can grow, you stop expecting perfection. You stop needing to appear flawless, and instead you become willing to be real. You start seeing conflict not as a sign of incompatibility, but as an opportunity to understand each other better. You become more patient with your own flaws and more compassionate with someone else's. You learn to step into difficult conversations not to win, but to transform. Suddenly, your partner's feedback doesn't feel like judgment, it feels like direction. Their honesty doesn't threaten your worth, it strengthens your bond. Growth becomes something you do together, slowly, gently, consistently. Think about how relationships change when one or both people see faults as permanent. A small argument suddenly becomes a character verdict. A mistake becomes a label. A moment of frustration becomes a story about who someone really is. But in a growth-oriented mind, those same moments become stepping stones. You start to look at behaviors rather than identities. You begin to ask questions instead of assigning blame. You learn to respond with curiosity instead of defensiveness. And the relationship deepens, not because it's perfect, but because it's alive, growing, adapting, learning. Even friendships transform under these beliefs. Someone with a fixed mindset may pull away when their friend succeeds, feeling threatened, outshined, or left behind. But someone operating from growth can celebrate that success, knowing it doesn't diminish their own path. They welcome challenge, even from the people they care about. They choose friends who encourage them to expand rather than friends who only comfort their insecurities. And slowly, they build a circle not of comparison, but of evolution. Relationships become a mirror of your mindset. If you fear flaws, you will fear closeness. If you believe people cannot change, you will hold on to resentment. If you believe you must appear perfect, you will exhaust yourself trying to manage every impression. But if you believe growth is possible, real, slow, sometimes messy, but deeply possible, you give yourself permission to love more honestly. You give others space to show up imperfectly. You create a connection that doesn't break under pressure but bends, adapts, and strengthens. In the quiet moments of any relationship, the real question is never, are we perfect? The real question is, are we willing to grow together? And every time the answer is yes, something powerful begins. There are moments in life when you look back and realize that many of your beliefs about yourself didn't start with you. They were shaped by the people who raised you, taught you, guided you, or influenced you when you were still too young to question anything. A single comment, a tone, a pattern of praise, a moment of criticism, these invisible signals quietly teach you what success means, what failure means, and ultimately, what you mean. You may not remember the exact words, but you carry the impact. Someone may have praised you only when you succeeded, and without realizing it, you learned that your worth is tied to performance. Someone may have corrected you harshly when you struggled, and you absorbed the belief that mistakes make you lesser. Someone may have said you were so smart, so talented, naturally gifted, and even though those words sounded like compliments, they planted the idea that if you ever struggled, you would no longer be worthy of that praise. This is how early environments shape us, not through dramatic events, but through repeated messages that teach us how to think about ourselves. When a child grows up hearing praise for effort, curiosity, and persistence, they learn to value growth. They learn that it's okay to struggle, okay to be a beginner, okay to take risks. But when a child grows up being praised only for outcomes, for looking perfect, for achieving without effort, they begin to avoid anything that threatens their image. Suddenly, learning becomes stressful. Challenges feel dangerous. Trying becomes frightening, because failure means losing approval, and approval feels like survival. You might carry some of these early imprints even now, in ways you barely notice. Maybe you still hesitate to ask questions because someone once made you feel foolish for not knowing. Maybe you avoid new experiences because you were rewarded only when things came easily to you. Maybe you feel pressure to be strong all the time because you learned that needing help made you appear incapable. These patterns aren't personal flaws. They're inherited mindsets, shaped long before you realized you were absorbing them. But here's the powerful truth: once you see how these mindsets were formed, you can begin to reshape them. You can question the beliefs you once took for granted. You can redefine what effort means. You can let go of the fear that mistakes expose something permanent about you. You can step back from the old patterns and realize they are not you. They were given to you. And anything that was given can be changed. This is why awareness matters so much. Once you understand where your mindset came from, it stops controlling you. You start responding to challenges differently, not with the old fear of judgment, but with the willingness to grow. You start talking to yourself differently, not with harshness or pressure, but with encouragement and patience. And you begin guiding others differently too. Whether you influence children, colleagues, friends, or anyone in your life, you start to choose your words more carefully. You praise effort, not just results. You support progress, not perfection. You create a space where growth feels safe, where learning is welcomed, where mistakes are part of the path. And slowly, you realize something profound. The mindset you carry today doesn't just affect you, it echoes outward. It affects every relationship, every conversation, every environment you become a part of. When you embody growth, you give others permission to grow. When you release perfection, you help others release their own fears. When you encourage curiosity and resilience, you strengthen the people around you simply by the way you show up. You are no longer bound by the mindsets you inherited. You are shaping a new one, deliberately, thoughtfully, and with a quiet strength that expands into every corner of your life. There is a quiet turning point in every person's inner journey, the moment they realize that their mindset is not just a set of beliefs, but a lens shaping everything they experience. You may think you see the world as it is, but in truth, you see the world through the expectations you carry. And one of the most powerful parts of that lens is how you interpret challenge. Some people, without realizing it, approach difficulty with a sense of threat. They brace, they tighten, they expect judgment. In their mind, difficulty means they're not good enough. But others, those who operate from a growth perspective, approach difficulty with a very different energy. They lean in, they observe, they adjust, they see the challenge not as a wall, but as a teacher. And this difference, though subtle at first, becomes life-changing over time. What the research in the book reveals is that your mindset can be observed in real time, simply by watching how you react when things stop being easy. When a task becomes complicated, do you feel yourself being pulled towards self-protection? Do you feel embarrassment, or frustration, or fear? Or do you feel a kind of curiosity, an inner whisper that says, stay with this? The way you respond is not a matter of personality. It's a matter of mindset. And that mindset has been shaped over years by countless moments of praise, criticism, expectation, culture, and environment. But even if it has grown deep roots, it can still be changed. The book makes it clear: your brain, your abilities, your habits, your patterns, everything can adapt. What matters is the way you train yourself to interpret the world. One of the most important insights from the research is that the path to mastery always includes struggle, confusion, and repeated attempts. The best performers in any field, whether sports, science, business, or art, are not the ones who avoid difficulty. They are the ones who are willing to enter it. They do not look for easy wins. They look for situations that challenge their limits. They are not afraid of being seen as learners. They are not bothered by rough beginnings. They understand that growth requires friction, and they accept that friction with patience and humility. It's not that struggle feels good. It's that struggle feels meaningful. They know it is part of the process of becoming who they want to be. But there's something deeper here that the book emphasizes, something many people overlook. Growth is not just about persistence. It's about strategy, reflection, and willingness to try again with new understanding. A fixed mindset approach would say, I failed because I'm not good at this. But a growth-oriented approach says, I failed because I haven't learned this yet. That tiny shift, from identity to process, changes everything. It creates room for experimentation. It creates room for improvement. It creates room for the mind to breathe instead of collapse under pressure. And the moment you internalize this shift, you begin to realize how many possibilities you had been blocking simply because you were afraid to look imperfect. This is why feedback becomes so powerful under a growth mindset. Instead of hearing feedback as an attack on who you are, you begin hearing it as information about what you can do differently. It stops feeling personal and starts feeling directional. You are no longer trying to defend yourself, you are trying to understand yourself. And when you reach that point, improvement accelerates. Not because you suddenly become more talented, but because you are no longer wasting energy protecting a fragile identity. You are channeling your energy toward progress, clarity, and learning. And slowly, something shifts inside you. You begin to trust the process more than the appearance. You begin to value effort over ease. You begin to respect the quiet, unglamorous, daily work that strengthens you from the inside. Growth becomes less of an idea and more of a lived experience, something you feel in the way you approach challenges, the way you talk to yourself, the way you recover, the way you keep moving forward. And this inner transformation, subtle but steady, becomes the foundation for the life you're creating now. There comes a point where you begin to truly understand how powerful your inner dialogue is, the quiet conversations you have with yourself that no one else hears. These thoughts shape your courage, your persistence, your willingness to try. They influence whether you take the next step or freeze where you are. The book makes something very clear. Your mindset is not just an external pattern, it's an internal voice, one that either lifts you into growth or pushes you into self-protection. When that voice carries the weight of past judgment or old limitations, it becomes harsh, demanding, brittle. It tells you not to try. It tells you to avoid anything uncertain. It tells you that the safest path is the smallest one. And even though that voice feels familiar, it never truly reflects your potential. It reflects your fear. But as you deepen your understanding of the growth mindset, you start noticing how different the inner voice can sound. Instead of tightening around mistakes, it examines them. Instead of shaming you for not being perfect, it encourages you to keep going. Instead of amplifying doubt, it asks questions that move you forward. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It happens through awareness, through recognizing that the voice you've been listening to is not the only one available to you. And the more you choose the voice that supports growth, the stronger it becomes. You begin to feel safer trying new things. You begin to recover faster from setbacks. You begin to see yourself as someone who can evolve, rather than someone who must prove themselves at every turn. Another layer becomes visible when you examine how you interpret effort. Many people subconsciously believe that needing effort means something is wrong with them, that they are less capable, less talented, less worthy. This belief can trace back to early praise that focused on being naturally good, rather than being committed, curious, or hardworking. And so, as adults, they avoid tasks that require struggle. They prefer comfort over challenge, ease over growth. But what the research shows, again and again, is that effort is the engine of mastery. Nothing great, nothing lasting, nothing meaningful was ever built without effort. Effort is what turns potential into skill, and skill into confidence. When you embrace this truth, effort stops feeling like a burden and starts feeling like a pathway. You begin to see it as proof that you're building something real inside yourself. There is also a powerful insight about resilience. People who live from a fixed mindset often collapse under failure because they believe it exposes a permanent flaw. But those who live from growth see failure as information. They study it, analyze it, adjust their approach, and try again. You might notice how this changes your emotional experience as well. When you feel locked into a fixed identity, failure feels deeply personal. But when you see yourself as someone capable of learning, failure becomes tolerable, even useful. The emotional sting softens. The fear loses its grip. You begin to rise from difficulty with more strength than you had before. And slowly, resilience becomes part of who you are, not because you force it, but because you no longer treat setbacks as verdicts. As your understanding deepens, something else unfolds. You start to recognize the difference between goals focused on proving yourself and goals focused on improving yourself. When your goal is to prove yourself, you become rigid, anxious, and easily discouraged. The pressure to perform perfectly makes every situation feel like a judgment. But when your goal is to improve yourself, the world opens. You choose challenges that stretch you. You seek feedback that guides you. You allow yourself to be a beginner without shame. You begin to set goals that align with your long-term growth, rather than goals that protect your short-term image. And this shift is transformative. It replaces fear with direction. It replaces self-doubt with possibility. It replaces stagnation with steady, deliberate progress. This is the point in the journey where the growth mindset becomes less of an idea and more of a way of living. You become aware of your inner barriers. You begin dissolving beliefs that once felt immovable. You take setbacks less personally. You approach challenges with more openness. And you discover that growth is not a dramatic breakthrough, it is a quiet, ongoing expansion. Every day, in small ways, you become someone who is capable of more. You begin trusting yourself not because you expect perfection, but because you know you can evolve through anything life places in front of you. There comes a stage where you begin to understand that growth is not only about your inner world, your beliefs, your reactions, your mindset, but also about the systems you build around yourself. Many people approach improvement with bursts of motivation, sudden plans, or temporary discipline. They push hard for a while, then stop, then try again, and each time they stop, they assume they lack something fundamental. They think they're missing talent, willpower, or natural consistency. But the truth, as highlighted so clearly in the research, is that real growth does not depend on being naturally disciplined. It depends on designing an environment that supports who you want to become. When you look closely, you begin to see how the people who grow steadily, those who rise over time, rarely rely on motivation alone. They create routines, habits, and small structures that make success easier and failure recoverable. They do not trust willpower because willpower fluctuates. Instead, they trust systems, simple processes repeated with patience. This kind of structure is not rigid, it is supportive. It removes friction. It reduces emotional overwhelm. It provides a stable path forward even on the days when doubt is loud or energy is low. And slowly, these systems become part of who you are. You stop asking, "Do I feel motivated?" and start asking, "What's the next step?" This shift changes everything. But there is another insight here, one the book stresses again and again. Growth thrives on honest reflection. Not self-criticism, not shame, reflection, the ability to look at what happened, without drama or self-blame, and ask, "What can I learn from this?" People operating from a fixed mindset avoid reflection because it feels painful, as if examining their mistakes confirms a deep flaw. But people rooted in growth seek reflection because it illuminates the path to improvement. They know that clarity, not avoidance, leads to progress. They're willing to analyze their patterns, their habits, their strategies, not as a way to judge themselves, but as a way to refine their approach. And with every cycle of reflection, they rise a little higher. Another powerful part of this stage is understanding how comparison shapes your mindset. When you live from a fixed belief system, other people's success feels threatening. You may admire them, but some part of you feels smaller in their presence. You may measure your worth against their achievements, their pace, their outcomes. But growth turns comparison into something very different. It becomes inspiration instead of intimidation. You start learning from those who are ahead of you. You study their habits instead of envying their results. You recognize that their journey has nothing to do with your worth, and everything to do with what's possible for you. Instead of shrinking under their success, you rise to meet your own potential. You also begin to understand the deeper meaning of mastery. Mastery is not about being the best. It's not about outperforming others or proving your talent. Mastery is about devotion to improvement, about loving the process more than the praise. It's about returning to the basics even when you've grown advanced, about refining small skills long after others have stopped paying attention. Those who reach mastery do so because they no longer chase validation, they chase growth. They stop obsessing over how talented they appear and begin focusing on how capable they can become. They are patient with themselves. They are resilient in the face of difficulty. They welcome challenges not because they enjoy struggle, but because they understand that struggle is the doorway to greater skill and deeper confidence. And slowly, without even noticing at first, you begin experiencing a quieter, deeper shift. You stop rushing. You stop fearing slow progress. You stop expecting instant results. Progress becomes less about speed and more about direction. You start valuing small improvements, tiny steps that accumulate over time, because you understand they lead to lifelong strength. The growth mindset becomes less of a concept and more of a foundation, shaping your daily behaviors, your choices, your focus, your way of living. And in this stage, growth begins to feel natural, something that flows through you, not something you force. Sometimes you begin to notice a quiet shift inside yourself, a subtle awareness that the boundaries you once believed were fixed were never as solid as they appeared. You sense that the obstacles you carried for so long were not made of ability, but of belief about who you were allowed to become, belief about how far you could stretch, belief about what was possible for you. And as this realization deepens, a space opens within you. Not a dramatic breakthrough, but a gentle widening, a recognition that you are far more capable than the identity you once protected. You start to understand that your life isn't defined by your starting point, but by the direction you choose from here. The book makes this point with clarity. Potential is not a measurement of what you can already do, it is a measurement of how much you are willing to develop. People often assume their early performance reflects their long-term ability, but early performance reflects only one thing: experience, not destiny. Beginners struggle, learners fail, growth requires awkward attempts and imperfect practice. Yet many people interpret these beginnings as limitations, closing the door long before their real strength has time to emerge. The individuals who eventually rise are not those who showed instant talent, but those who refused to let early struggle define the rest of their story. Another truth becomes clearer as you study this perspective: effort is not a sign of inadequacy. It is the signal of transformation. When you engage deeply, when you push through confusion, when you return after setbacks, you are not proving weakness, you are building capacity. You are strengthening neural pathways. You are expanding your skill, your tolerance, your resilience. This understanding reshapes your relationship with hard work. You no longer ask, "Why is this so difficult for me?" Instead, you begin asking, "What part of me is growing through this difficulty?" And that question changes the experience entirely. It removes the shame. It removes the self-attack. It replaces fear with direction. Embracing this mindset also shifts how you relate to uncertainty. Instead of tightening or retreating, you allow yourself to stay present with the unknown. You begin to understand that uncertainty is not a warning sign, it is evidence that you are stepping beyond your old limits. Growth requires moving into spaces that feel unfamiliar, uncomfortable, unstructured. It requires patience with not knowing. It requires the emotional strength to remain open even when outcomes are unclear. And the more you practice this, the more your anxiety softens. You stop demanding immediate mastery. You stop pressuring yourself to have all the answers. You learn to stand in the middle of transition without losing your sense of self. This stage also reveals something profound about inner dialogue. During difficult periods, moments of frustration, disappointment, or doubt, the way you speak to yourself becomes the deciding factor. Anyone can feel confident in moments of success. But growth requires a different kind of strength, the ability to talk to yourself with steadiness even when things feel heavy. When you can say, "I can learn from this," in your lowest moments, you build a foundation that no external achievement can give you. That sentence becomes a compass. It points you forward, even when the path is not clear. It reminds you that your value isn't measured by a single setback, but by your willingness to continue evolving. And then, almost quietly, your behavior begins to reflect this shift. You attempt things you once avoided. You persist through challenges that would have discouraged you in the past. You adapt faster. You recover more gently. You approach opportunities with curiosity instead of fear. It's not that life becomes easier, it's that you become more capable, more grounded, more open to the long, steady journey of growth. And this is when the transformation becomes real. You stop trying to protect a fixed identity, and you start becoming the person you once doubted you could be. At this stage of your journey, something important begins to reveal itself. Your understanding of success starts to shift from external achievement to internal development. The world often teaches you to measure success through outcomes, results, rankings, recognition, applause. These things can be motivating, but they can also trap you. They create a mindset where your sense of worth rises and falls with every performance. They make you anxious when you're ahead and discouraged when you're behind. But when you step into the deeper lessons of growth, you begin to see success differently. Success becomes a process, not a moment. It becomes a pattern of choices, not a single victory. It becomes the quiet commitment to improve, even when no one is watching. This shift is powerful because it removes the pressure to prove yourself constantly. Instead of obsessing over how well you perform, you begin focusing on how consistently you learn. Instead of chasing perfect results, you chase better methods. You stop treating outcomes as judgments and start treating them as feedback. A good result becomes encouragement. A poor result becomes information. And in this mindset, progress feels steady, doable, sustainable. You no longer swing between extremes of confidence and doubt. You develop a calmer, more grounded relationship with your own potential. Another deep insight from the book becomes especially clear here. Your identity strengthens not when you avoid challenge, but when you move through it with awareness. People who fear failure often cling tightly to what they already know because it keeps them safe from being judged. But people who embrace growth willingly step into the discomfort of being a beginner. They understand that confidence is not the absence of difficulty, it is the product of repeatedly facing difficulty without giving up. Confidence becomes something you build, not something you magically possess. Every time you stretch yourself, even slightly, you add another layer of strength to your identity. And with that shift, you begin to see obstacles differently. Instead of interpreting them as signs you should turn back, you see them as natural parts of a meaningful path. An obstacle doesn't say, stop, it says, learn. It doesn't signal failure, it signals depth. When you engage with challenges this way, your emotional experience transforms. You no longer lean into panic or self-criticism. You lean into problem-solving, into patience, into understanding. You start asking better questions. What skill is this situation asking me to develop? Where is the opportunity hidden inside this difficulty? And those questions guide you towards solutions that would have been invisible in a fixed mindset. This stage also expands your sense of agency. You begin to realize that you are not at the mercy of your circumstances, your past, or your limits. You have influence over the direction of your life, through effort, through consistency, through the stories you choose to believe about yourself. You become aware of how quickly your mind can shape a moment. A challenge can become a threat, or a teacher. A setback can become a dead end, or a lesson. A slow period can feel like stagnation, or preparation. And the more you practice choosing the interpretation that serves your growth, the more empowered you feel. Not in a loud, forceful way, but in a grounded, steady way that lasts. As you continue embracing this deeper form of growth, you begin to understand that your real strength comes from adaptability. You become less attached to being right and more committed to learning. You become less driven by fear and more driven by purpose. You no longer need to protect your identity because your identity is flexible, capable of adjusting, expanding, and evolving. And this flexibility gives you a kind of freedom that fixed mindsets can never provide. The freedom to try, the freedom to fail, the freedom to grow, the freedom to become. In this video, we explored how your mind shapes your experiences, how your beliefs influence your potential, and how growth becomes possible the moment you stop treating your abilities as fixed. We uncovered the power of effort, the value of learning, the strength found in resilience, and the quiet freedom that comes from choosing progress over perfection. You saw how challenges become teachers, how setbacks become information, and how your inner dialogue becomes the foundation of your future. And now, as you step forward, you carry with you a new understanding, one that reminds you that growth is always available, change is always possible, and your story is still unfolding.